The last tip that Steph Curry left at Tony's Diner wasn't like the others. It was a Monday night in November 2009 at 11:47 p.m., and the world was about to change in ways that nobody could have predicted. Outside, the street was wet from the rain that had fallen just hours before, and the streetlights reflected in the puddles in shades of amber and orange, creating small pools of golden light on the dark pavement. Inside the restaurant, only 3 customers remained. The reek's fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting a warm glow over the worn vinyl booths and cracked linoleum floor that had seen thousands of footsteps over the decades. Steph Curry, young and freshly arrived at the NBA with the Golden State Warriors, sat at his usual table in the corner, by the window. He was eating a cheesesteak, drinking black coffee while studying game statistics in a worn notebook, his eyes focused and determined. Nobody back then knew he would become a legend. But Rosa Martínez. Rosa already knew. Rosa Martínez, 49 years old, had worked at Tony's Diner for 27 years. Her hair, once completely black, now had gray streaks she didn't have time to dye. Her eyes were brown, the color of the coffee she poured into cups 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. She wore a faded pink waitress uniform with her name embroidered in white letters that were already peeling. Her hands showed the years of work, a few burn scars from hot plates, calluses from lifting heavy trays, nails always clean, but never manicured. She tired easily now, feeling the weight of the shifts accumulating in the base of her back with each passing day. Rosa had raised her daughter alone, had worked harder than most people could imagine, had sacrificed in ways that only a mother understands. But when Rosa approached Steph's table that night, her entire face lit up with genuine warmth. "More coffee, dear?" she asked, her voice carrying a Spanish accent that had never quite faded, even after spending most of her life in America. Steph looked up, smiling at the familiar face of the woman who had become part of his ritual. "Of course, Rosa. You're the best." That night, something was different. Rosa paused longer than usual near the table, her movements slowing. Her eyes fixed on Steph's face, as if she were recording something precious in her memory, as if she knew this moment would matter later. "You know what I've noticed?" said Steph, putting his notebook aside and giving her his full attention. "You never complain. Not once. In 2 years of coming here, not a single complaint. Not about your feet hurting, not about the customers, not about anything." Rosa laughed, a low, genuine laugh that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. She pulled up a chair and sat down, something she probably wasn't supposed to do during her shift. But that night, nobody was watching, and she needed to speak her truth. "There's a reason for everything, mijo," she said, softly, the Spanish term of endearment slipping naturally into her English. "I have a daughter, Sofia. She's 23 years old. She wants to be a doctor, you know? Since she was a child, she's always wanted to heal people. She was always intelligent, always got perfect grades in every class, perfect scores, perfect student, perfect daughter." Steph kept his eyes on her, waiting, sensing that something important was about to unfold. She got accepted to Stanford University. Medical school. The dream? Her dream since she was 6 years old, playing doctor with her dolls? I still remember her saying she would help people who couldn't afford doctors. Rosa hesitated, her voice getting quieter, more vulnerable. But the scholarship? It covered only 60%. The other 40%. That's $122,000 per year for 4 years. Steph felt his chest tighten. He did the math in his head. $488,000, give or take. That's what it costs for my daughter to become a doctor. That's what we owe if I can't find another way." Rosa took a deep breath, steadying herself before continuing. "Since she got accepted 8 months ago, I started working as a waitress at another place, too. Saturdays and Sundays. I work here Monday through Friday, and then I drive across town to work nights and weekends. I'm working 18-hour days sometimes, mijo. But I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it because it's for Sofia." Rosa raised a hand when she saw Steph was about to speak, sensing he wanted to comfort her or tell her it would be okay. "Let me finish. I save every tip, Steph. Every single coin. Every dollar bill. Every $5 bill. Every $10 bill. Every $20 bill. I take them all home and I put them in a jar, a mason jar, on my kitchen table. Sofia doesn't know about it. Nobody knows. I haven't told a soul because I don't want her to feel guilty. I don't want her to feel like she needs to work. She needs to study. She needs to become the doctor she's always wanted to be." "How much have you saved so far?" asked Steph quietly, genuinely moved by her determination. $18,000, Rosa answered, a mixture of pride and desperation in her voice, the weight of what she was carrying evident in every word. 18,000 in 8 months. Every single tip. Some nights I make $30 in tips. Some nights, maybe 50. I take it home, and I add it to the jar. If I keep going, like this, if nothing goes wrong, if I don't get sick, if I don't miss a single shift, if I can somehow work even more hours, maybe I can save 100,000 before she graduates. Maybe. That's if I work myself to exhaustion. That's if my body holds up." Steph looked at his own hands. He was 21 years old. His hands were strong, athletic, trained for basketball. His hands had never done this kind of work. His hands had never learned sacrifice in this way. "You're going to make it," he said finally. But even as the words left his mouth, he wasn't sure if he believed them. "You're going to make it, Rosa." But there was doubt in his voice, and Rosa heard it. Rosa smiled, that tired smile of someone who knows the truth beneath the hope, who has learned to live with the gap between dreams and reality. "I hope so, mijo. I really do. That's all I have. Hope. And this jar." She stood up, with effort. Her knees made a sound that both of them heard, but neither acknowledged. She returned to the kitchen, leaving the coffee pot on the table. Rosa always did this, always left a little extra coffee for her loyal customers. A small gesture of generosity from someone with very little to give. Steph Curry stared at that coffee pot for a long moment. Then he looked at his empty cup, then out the window at the wet street, at the rain that had stopped but left everything glistening and new. When he left, he placed a $100 bill under his plate. It was a tip he had never left before. He said nothing, but his actions spoke volumes. That night, for the first time in his life, Steph Curry truly understood what sacrifice meant. It wasn't about winning games or setting records. It was about showing up day after day and giving everything you had for someone else's dream. Nobody knew back then that Steph Curry would become one of the greatest basketball players of all time. And nobody knew that a half-hour conversation in a small restaurant in Oakland would change everything for them both. 20 years passed. 2 decades. 7,305 days. Time moved forward the way it always does, changing people, changing circumstances, changing everything except what matters most: the memory of true sacrifice. Steph Curry had become a legend beyond his playing days. 2 championship rings, 3 MVP awards, records broken, Entire stadiums screaming his name. Endorsement deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. He was now 36 years old, living in a TD mansion in the Bay Area with his family, driving cars that cost more than most people's houses. He had become more famous, more successful, more legendary than anyone could have imagined in that small restaurant 2 decades earlier. He had wealth beyond measure, success beyond comprehension, and yet something was missing. But he had never forgotten that Monday night at Tony's Diner. Not for one moment, in 20 years. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October 2029, October 15th at 3:45 p.m. Steph was in his home, in his private movie theater, scrolling through Instagram without really thinking about it, passing time between meetings. A post from a local Oakland news page appeared in his feed unexpectedly. Local healthcare center transforms neighborhood. Founded by former Stanford Medical School graduate. The algorithm had decided to show him this, and his life was about to change again. There was a photo. A woman in her early to mid-40s, wearing a white lab coat, smiling confidently in front of a new building with the words, Martínez Community Health Center, in large letters. The caption read, Dr. Sofia Martínez, class of 2012, opened this center in the same neighborhood where she grew up, bringing hope and health care to those who needed it most. Steph stopped scrolling immediately. He clicked on the photo, enlarged it, studied every detail with intensity. It was Sofia. It had to be. The eyes, those same eyes he had seen in Rosa's face 20 years ago. The face that had smiled at him over a cup of coffee. The eyes that had held so much hope and determination. But to the side of her, in a smaller photo that was almost hidden, was another woman. A woman in her late 60s, with white hair, but smiling, really smiling. The kind of smile that only someone who had fought her whole life could smile, who had sacrificed everything could smile. He knew immediately. He knew it was Rosa. Steph descended into the rabbit hole of the internet, driven by something he couldn't quite name. He found Sofia Martínez's Instagram, Each Dra Sofia Heals, posts about her work at the health center, photos of patients with permission, inspiring messages about preventive health care in underserved communities. He scrolled back, months, years, watching her journey unfold in photos and captions. Sofia, in her white coat at her Stanford graduation, her face beaming with pride. Sofia during her residency, tired but determined. Sofia, receiving an award for Best Healthcare Community Advocate in 2015, her mother's name mentioned in the acceptance speech. But there was something that caught his attention. In the most recent posts, there was someone in the background, an older woman, often partially obscured, helping prepare clinics, carrying medical supplies, organizing files. She appeared in photo after photo, always in the background, always supporting, always there. The caption from a 2023 post read simply, "Grateful for my mother's support every step of the way. She sacrificed everything." Steph clicked on the photo, zooming in on the woman in the background. The woman organizing medical supplies, it was Rosa. Definitely Rosa. Her hair was completely white now, her face more wrinkled, her body smaller than he remembered, but her eyes were exactly the same determination, the same love, the same sacrifice. But there was something that made his stomach drop. Steph kept scrolling through months and months of posts, noticing patterns that worried him. He found a post from Sofia from 4 months ago, sharing an article about unpaid caregivers for aging parents. The caption said, Sometimes those who sacrifice the most for our dreams continue to sacrifice in silence. Thank you to every parent who never stops. There were also comments in some old posts from college friends asking about Rosa. One friend wrote, "How's your mom doing?" Hope, "She's resting now." But Sofia had only responded with a heart emoji. No words. The lack of response troubled Steph. It suggested that maybe Rosa wasn't resting. Maybe she was still working too hard. Then Steph found a post from 2 years ago, from a friend of Sofia's, sharing a photo of Sofia at a clinic, with the caption, "So proud of you, fighting for your mom's medical care, even with the rising costs. The system is broken, but you're fixing it one patient at a time." Steph's stomach dropped, like an elevator with cut cables. Fighting for her mom's medical care. Sacrificing to help her mother. The cycle had reversed, but it hadn't ended. Rosa had given everything so Sofia could become a doctor. And now Sofia was sacrificing to take care of her mother. The sacrifice continued. He picked up the phone and called his personal assistant without hesitation. "I need you to find someone for me," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "A woman named Rosa Martínez, or Sofia Martínez. She's a doctor in Oakland with a health center called the Martínez Community Health Center. I need her address, phone number, everything you can find. And it needs to be completely discreet. Nobody can know about this. Nobody." "Yes, sir. How soon do you need this?" 2 hours, Steph said firmly. "I need it in 2 hours." He hung up the phone and stared out his window at the Oakland skyline. Somewhere down there, in a modest home on the east side, was a woman who had changed his life by not changing anything about her own situation except her commitment to one person's dream. Rosa had never stopped sacrificing. She had carried that burden for 20 years, and then her daughter had taken it up in turn, continuing the cycle of sacrifice. And Steph Curry, the greatest basketball player of his generation, had only just realized what real greatness looked like. It didn't look like championships. It looked like Rosa Martínez, working 2 jobs, saving every tip for 2 decades. Steph arrived at Tony's Diner on a Thursday afternoon at exactly 3:15 p.m. The restaurant had barely changed in 20 years. The same vinyl booths, though more worn now. The same worn linoleum floor. The same old photographs on the walls. Some of them new, most of them old memories captured in frames. He wore sunglasses and a baseball cap, hoping not to be recognized. He was Steph Curry, one of the most famous athletes in the world, and yet he didn't want anyone to notice him. Not yet. He sat at his usual corner table, the same table where he had sat 20 years ago, and ordered a coffee. 20 minutes later, he saw her. She was coming out of the kitchen, helping the chef with something. She was much older now, her back slightly curved, her movements slower, more careful. She moved through the restaurant like someone who had learned to protect their body because they knew how much work remained to be done. But when she turned and her eyes met his across the restaurant, he saw recognition flash across her face, confusion and hope mixing together. "No," she whispered, barely audibly. "It can't be." Steph removed his sunglasses slowly, deliberately, letting his face come fully into view. Rosa's legs nearly gave out. She grabbed a table to steady herself, her hand shaking. "Mr. Curry? Steph? It's really... How? What are you doing here?" "Hello, Rosa," he said quietly, standing up. "It's been a long time." The other staff members began to notice. Someone pulled out their phone to take a picture. But Steph was already moving, approaching Rosa with gentle purpose and guiding her toward the back office. He asked the manager for privacy, explained that he needed to have an important conversation with one of their employees. The manager, recognizing the moment for what it was, immediately agreed and locked the office door behind them. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Rosa was crying. Her hands were shaking. 20 years of sacrifice, of hope, of exhaustion, all of it written across her face. "How did you—" she began, her voice trembling. "I found your daughter online," Steph said gently. "I read about her work. I saw the photos. And I understood, finally, what you were telling me that night, 20 years ago. You were telling me that real sacrifice looks like this. Not championships, not records, not money. Real sacrifice is showing up, day after day, giving everything you have for someone else's dream." Rosa sat down heavily in the chair behind the desk. Her legs simply wouldn't hold her anymore. "You remembered that conversation? After all these years, you remembered?" "I never forgot it," Steph said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not for a single day in the past 20 years. I've thought about what you told me. Every time I won a championship, I thought about you. Every time I broke a record, I thought about you and that mason jar. I've thought about your sacrifice more than I've thought about my own achievements." The office door opened without warning. A woman in her early to mid-40s, still wearing her white lab coat, stood in the doorway. Her face went pale as she recognized who was sitting in the office with her mother. "Mom, why is Steph Curry in our—" "Sofia," Rosa said quietly, her voice steady now, as if speaking to her daughter gave her strength. "Come here, mija." Sofia stepped into the room slowly, as if moving through a dream, as if her brain wasn't quite processing what her eyes were telling her. "I don't understand what's happening. Is something wrong?" Steph stood up and extended his hand respectfully. "Dr. Martinez, your mother told me about you 20 years ago. She told me about your dream of becoming a doctor. She told me about the money she was saving, working double shifts, building something from nothing, just to help you through medical school without drowning in debt." Sofia looked at her mother with confusion, then back at Steph, searching for understanding. "How do you know about any of that? How do you know my mother's personal dreams?" "Because I never forgot," Steph said simply, "and because I've spent the last 20 years thinking about what real greatness looks like. It looks like your mother. It looks like a woman who worked 3 jobs for years so that her daughter could become a doctor. It looks like sacrifice that nobody notices, that nobody applauds, but that changes the world." He pulled an envelope from his jacket, a substantial envelope that felt heavy with significance. "This is for you, Rosa, for the sacrifices you made, for the lesson you taught me, for being the strongest person I've ever known." Rosa opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check for $250,000. And when she saw the number, when the reality of it sank in, she fell to her knees, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. Gratitude, relief, validation. Her sacrifice had been seen. Her sacrifice had mattered. 3 months later, the expanded clinic held its grand opening celebration. The original clinic had been too small, understaffed, and perpetually underfunded. But with a generous donation from an anonymous benefactor, anonymous at Rosa's request, because she wanted the focus to be on the work, not on the money, Sofia had been able to expand to a second location and double her staff. She had been able to serve more patients. She had been able to bring health care to more people. Steph attended the opening, but he stayed in the background. This was Sofia's day. This was Rosa's day. This was the community's celebration. He simply wanted to witness the fruit of Rosa's sacrifice finally coming into full bloom, to see the legacy of sacrifice transform into something beautiful. The clinic was beautiful, modern but warm, filled with natural light and plants, filled with people from the community who had been helped by Sofia's care. There was a ribbon-cutting ceremony. There were speeches about healthcare equity and community empowerment. And then Sofia did something unexpected. She asked Steph to come to the front of the room. 20 years ago, she told the crowd, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, my mother made a decision that shaped the trajectory of my entire life. She decided to sacrifice her own comfort, her own time, her own rest, so that I could pursue my dream of becoming a doctor. Every day for years, she worked multiple jobs. Morning shifts here, evening shifts somewhere else, weekend shifts anywhere she could find them. Every tip she received went into a jar at home. She never complained. She never wavered. She just kept going. Sofia's voice cracked with emotion, and the entire room fell silent. I didn't know, until recently, that my mother had inspired someone else with her sacrifice. I didn't know that a conversation she had with Steph Curry one night in 2009 had stayed with him for 2 decades, that he had thought about her sacrifice more than about his own championships. Steph, I want to thank you, not just for the generous donation, though that has changed our ability to serve this community, but for recognizing my mother's sacrifice, for seeing her, for understanding that true greatness isn't about championships or records. It's about love. It's about showing up and giving everything you have for someone else. The crowd erupted in applause. Steph felt tears streaming down his face, the weight of recognition finally washing over him. But that wasn't the end of the story. What happened next was something neither Steph nor Sofia had planned, something that emerged from the recognition of sacrifice itself. Steph approached a table near the clinic entrance. On it sat a simple mason jar, the actual jar that Rosa had used to collect her tips all those years ago, the same jar that had held her dreams and her determination. Next to it was a sign, the Rosa Martínez Community Care Fund. Every dollar donated will be matched by the Rosa Martínez Foundation to provide care for families in need. Your mother's sacrifice inspired mine, Steph announced to the crowd, his voice carrying weight and conviction. I've established a foundation in her name, the Rosa Martínez Foundation for First-Generation Healthcare Professionals. This foundation will award full scholarships and grants to first-generation medical students and healthcare professionals who commit to serving underserved communities for at least 5 years. We're starting with an initial commitment of $2 million, and I promise you, this is just the beginning. The room went absolutely silent. But here's the beautiful part, Steph continued, his voice rising with emotion. This foundation will also match community donations, dollar for dollar, up to 10 times. For every dollar that families in this neighborhood contribute to the Rosa Martínez Fund, whether it's spare change or a dollar bill, the foundation will match it 10 times over. Because real change doesn't come from billionaires like me. It comes from communities like this, where people sacrifice for each other, where neighbors care for neighbors, where someone like Rosa Martínez decides that her daughter's dream is worth more than her own comfort. In the weeks that followed, something remarkable happened. People from the neighborhood started bringing coins and dollar bills to that jar at the clinic entrance. A grandmother contributed her Social Security check. A construction worker deposited his day's tips. Children brought their allowance. Within 3 months, the jar had collected $8,000. With the foundation's matching funds, that became $80,000. That $80,000 was used to provide free medical care for families who couldn't afford it. It funded scholarships for students applying to medical school. It paid for medications for patients who had to choose between buying food and buying their insulin. And Rosa? Rosa finally got to rest. Not completely. She volunteered at the clinic 2 days a week, helping in whatever way she could, answering phones, greeting patients, sharing her story. But for the first time in 56 years of working, she had the luxury of choosing how to spend her time. She spent it with her daughter. She spent it helping the community that had raised her. She spent it knowing that her sacrifice had not been invisible. It had been recognized and honored and transformed into something that would help thousands of people for generations to come. 1 year after the clinic expansion opened, the Rosa Martínez Foundation announced that it had provided full scholarships to 47 first-generation medical students. Those students were now in medical school or residency programs or working as doctors in underserved communities across the country. Each one of them understood that they were there because of one woman's decision 20 years earlier to put her daughter's dream above her own comfort. The first anniversary of the foundation, Steph and Sofia stood together in the clinic, looking at the mason jar on the table. It now held $3,500, the ongoing contributions of a community that understood the power of small sacrifices made with love. "Do you know what my mother said to me last week?" Sofia asked Steph. "What?" "She said that this was always the dream. Not the money, not the recognition, just the knowledge that her sacrifice meant something, that it changed something, that it helped someone." Steph nodded slowly, understanding finally settling into his bones. "She taught me that a long time ago. I just finally understood it. It took me 20 years, but I understood it." They stood in silence for a moment, watching people come and go from the clinic. Patients receiving care, students studying in the waiting area, community members dropping coins into the jar, each one believing that their small contribution was part of something larger than themselves. "You know," Sofia said, "my mother has a new ritual now. Every morning, she wakes up and she's grateful. Not for the money or the foundation or any of that, but for the fact that she can finally rest, and for the knowledge that her life mattered, that her sacrifice was seen." Steph thought about the man he had been 20 years ago, the greatest basketball player in the world, chasing championships and records and legacy. He thought about how empty that had felt, how hollow success could be without meaning. He thought about how it took the quiet sacrifice of one waitress to teach him what legacy really meant. It wasn't about what you accomplish. It was about who you inspire. It wasn't about how much you achieve. It was about how much you help others achieve. And it wasn't about being remembered for your greatness. It was about helping others be remembered for theirs. As Steph left the clinic that afternoon, he noticed something that made him smile. Above the mason jar, someone had placed a small plaque. It read, "Every coin counts. Every sacrifice matters. Every dream is worth believing in." And below that, in smaller letters, someone had handwritten, "Thank you, Rosa, for showing us what greatness really looks like."